My wife cheated on me with my friend, pretended that I didn't cow anything and invited them to dinner. They didn't even know what was waiting. I found myself sitting at my desk, reflecting on the 28 years since I tied the knot. Memories of our honeymoon flooded my mind, bringing back the happiest moments of my life. I was especially struck by thoughts of our time in the Bahamas with Emma, which filled me with a wave of nostalgia and thankfulness. That trip was something truly special, a magical experience that would forever have a cherished spot in my heart. From the very beginning, it felt as if we had stepped into a fairy tale, one that washed away all the worries of the outside world. As we strolled hand in hand along the pristine beaches of Nassau, the gentle waves lapping at our feet, we were completely absorbed by the beauty that surrounded us. The air was filled with the sweet fragrance of hibiscus, a constant reminder of the romance and serenity enveloping us. But it wasn't just the breathtaking scenery that made our honeymoon unforgettable, it was the experiences we shared that left lasting imprints on our souls. We explored lush rainforests, uncovering hidden waterfalls that showcased nature's incredible beauty. Standing side by side, we marveled at the raw power and grandeur of the world around us. Our cliffside villa in Maui offered sweeping views that seemed to stretch endlessly, with each sunset painting the sky in vibrant colors. In those precious moments, as we held each other close, our hearts overflowed with love and devotion. The nights were like a symphony of romance, beginning with candlelit dinners on the beach beneath a canopy of stars. As we savored the exquisite flavors of fresh seafood and local delicacies, the tender glances in Emma's eyes made those evenings truly enchanting. The Bahamas became more than just a vacation spot, it was the epitome of our love story, a chapter brimming with treasured memories and shared dreams crafted just for us. Reflecting on our honeymoon, I could relive the depth and beauty of our connection. During that time, the Bahamas acted as a catalyst for our love, fortifying our bond and granting us moments of unparalleled joy and tranquility that I hold dear with genuine gratitude. Now, 28 years later, I was lost in my thoughts when my secretary walked into my office. She caught me gazing out the window, and after a moment, she asked, "Hey, Greg, what or who has put you in such a good mood lately? Did you win the lottery or something? Care to share?" At that moment, I realized I was smiling and had been in a great mood for the past 2 weeks. I explained to her that Emma had become incredibly attentive and loving recently, and for the first time in years, I felt truly appreciated and cherished. I wrapped up by saying that it felt like I was experiencing a second honeymoon, and I couldn't get her off my mind. Over the last couple of weeks, I'd been calling Emma several times a day just to hear her voice and tell her how much I loved and missed her. I felt like a lovesick teenager, but I didn't mind, I was genuinely happy and didn't want that feeling to fade. Emma and I had a solid marriage, but after 28 years, it's easy for things to become a bit routine. However, these past 2 weeks, Emma had been playful, wanting to be intimate almost every night and engaging in activities she hadn't in years. I never once considered that her change in affection was anything other than a beautiful revival of our marriage. I decided to surprise her with a romantic evening and left work early, a smile lighting up my face. I splurged $60 on 2 dozen roses at the florist and wrote a heartfelt card expressing my love. Then, I stopped by the liquor store to grab a bottle of her favorite wine along with a large box of chocolate-covered cherries, another one of her favorites. Tonight, I not only wanted to tell Emma how deeply I loved her and how happy she made me feel, but I also planned to surprise her with a 7-night cruise I had booked for us to celebrate our love. Grinning and practically skipping, I entered the house through the garage. As I climbed the steps to the kitchen, I was taken aback to find not my beloved wife Emma but our 29-year-old daughter, Sophie, sitting at the kitchen table. I smiled, kissed her forehead, and greeted her, "Hey sweetie, where's your mom?" 2 weeks prior, Sophie and Emma had a conversation that weighed heavily on my mind. "Mom, I'm really not sure about this," Sophie had said. "I love Dad so much, and I'm worried that if I go through with this, I'll hurt him." Emma reassured her, "Honey, Dad loves you, and he will understand. You said yourself that you need something more than what he can give you right now, and he's not getting any younger." I know he'll get it and let you have this one-time experience. I just can't bring myself to stand in front of Dad and tell him I'm going out with another man, Sophie replied, her voice trembling. Then let me do it. Robert will be waiting for you at the restaurant at 7 o'clock. You just need to be ready to leave by 6 o'clock when Dad gets home. I'll be here to explain everything to him, and you'll get to have the experience you've been craving. Sophie's doubts were evident. Yes, I agreed to the date, but I'm still unsure. This feels wrong, and I shouldn't go through with it. How can I look Dad in the eye for the next 2 weeks knowing that? I found myself agreeing to go on a date with another man. As I pondered this, I suggested to Sophie that she keep everything under wraps for now. During these 2 weeks, just shower him with love. Show your dad he has nothing to worry about. When I explain everything to him, I know he'll understand that what you're doing is simply about making new connections and having a little fun. Reach out to him, make his world a better place, and I promise, when I explain the situation that night, he'll welcome you back with open arms. He loves you and would do anything for you. He's always shown his love by giving you what you wanted. Yeah, you're probably right, she admitted, I mean, it's just one date. It doesn't mean I'm leaving Dad for another man. A fun night out after 28 years shouldn't be an issue. I'll make sure to show him how incredible he is and how much I love him every night until the date. When I get back, I'll do my best to make him the happiest man alive. Just make him feel valued and appreciated. He's a great guy and will give you this unique experience. Now I have to head home to cook dinner for Sam. Thanks, sweetheart, and say hi to him for me. When are you two planning to give us grandchildren? We've talked about it and plan to start trying in a few months, Sophie said before heading out. Emma found herself alone in the art studio that Greg had built for her behind their home, sitting in front of her latest project. Recently, she'd struggled to tap into her creativity, as the thought of being with another man weighed heavily on her conscience, blocking her artistic flow. But then she recalled Sophie's words, and suddenly her brushes sprang to life, filling the canvas with vibrant colors and emotional landscapes. She felt confident that she was making the right choice for herself, believing that her husband would understand. As she sat there, she spoke softly to herself, feeling the peace begin to ease her guilt. Greg may be upset initially, but I know I can make him see my perspective. I truly love this man, he's been an amazing husband and father. I'll be the best wife I can be and show him just how much I care. On the first night of her plan to shower him with affection, Emma slipped into his favorite baby doll nightgown after a refreshing shower, carefully styling her hair and applying her makeup. When Greg came home, she greeted him in the nightgown and high heels, leading him straight to the bedroom. In a surprise move she hadn't made in years, she undressed him, unbuckling his belt and sliding off his pants. With enthusiasm, she gave him pleasure below the belt, and the look of joy on his face filled her with warmth and happiness. "Why the sudden surprise, babe?" he asked, a playful grin on his face. "I just wanted to show you how special you are and how much I love you." "Did you enjoy it?" "I loved it. It's been so long since we've shared that, I'd forgotten how much I missed it." Feeling a wave of satisfaction, she pulled him onto the bed, and they shared a long kiss. It was the best intimacy they'd experienced in years, and in that moment, Emma started to reconsider her date with Robert. Over the next 2 weeks, their sex life blossomed into a new level of excitement. Greg transformed into a different man, smiling, laughing, telling jokes, and showing affection just like he used to. Emma felt happier than she had in a long time and began to rethink her plans for that date night. She even confided in Sophie about how much things had shifted and that perhaps she didn't need that experience anymore, given how they had rekindled their spirits. "Mom, this is wonderful, but don't throw in the towel just yet. Let's see how the next 2 weeks play out. Just enjoy each other and see where it leads. No need to cancel anything just yet, you can always change your mind at the last minute. I'm sure Robert will understand, but you have to realize that this opportunity may not come around again." "Okay, maybe you have a point. Tell me more about Robert. I know he's your friend's father, but remind me of his situation. Of course, Mom. When he found out that his wife, Emily, had an inoperable brain tumor, he took time off work to be with her every moment until she passed away. She was the love of his life, and after her death, he became a shadow of his former self. He hardly left the house and became a recluse, cutting off communication with family and friends. Her death left a void in his heart that he couldn't seem to fill. For the last 3 years, he's battled depression and has been quite withdrawn. When Emily and I suggested he start dating again, he expressed that he didn't know anyone and felt lost when it came to being with someone other than his wife. Hearing about this wonderful man brought tears to my eyes, and it struck me that I might have a solution for both of you. I shared with him your deep love for Dad over the past 28 years and how amazing of a wife you've always been. I explained that over the years, your intimate life had grown stagnant, and that Dad had slowed down with age. I told him about your desire to go on a date, not for a long-term romance, just for some friendship and a little excitement, but nothing serious, since you would never leave Dad. When Robert caught sight of Emma's photo, his eyes lit up with excitement. He grinned and asked if I thought she would be interested in going out with him. Here's how the conversation went. I promise you, if I show your mom this picture and tell her about you, she won't pass up this chance. But isn't she a few years older than you? Would that be an issue? Not at all. If she looks good, she would love to spend time with you. What about Greg, though? Will he really let her date me? After all, she is his wife. Leave that to me. Dad would do anything to make Mom happy, and she needs it just as much as you do. You two can really help each other out and become good friends. I'll set it all up. He'll talk to her, and if she agrees, I'll give you her number so you can plan a date and spend the night together. What do you mean, spend the night? You know we're both adults, right? Exactly. You both need each other. Get creative and plan an evening together. He thinks you're beautiful and would love to spend the night with you. If you're interested, I can give him your cell number and tell him to call you during the day. He looks great, and he's about 10 years younger than you. I know you'll be happy together. He just needs someone to talk to and a friend, and I know you two could help one another. The next day, Robert called Emma, and after a lovely chat, he asked her to be his companion for the evening. He complimented her on her picture and expressed how wonderful it would be to go out with her. Emma felt like a schoolgirl again, caught up in the thrill of trying something new. His flirtation sent butterflies fluttering in her stomach, and she agreed to the date, telling him she was excited to meet him. He offered to pick her up, but she preferred to meet him at the restaurant. As the date approached, they texted each other daily, their flirting intensifying. By the time the evening rolled around, Emma's messages would not have passed a simple fidelity test. Greg walked around with a big grin on his face, while Emma felt a new, uncontrollable desire. It was an exhilarating experience, far beyond her wildest dreams. I looked at my daughter and thought she was the most beautiful girl in the world. I felt immense pride in the woman she had become. I wished I had spent more time with her while she was growing up, but I had worked hard to provide for them and tried to be present as much as possible. As I smiled at her, I felt a twinge of embarrassment. Darling, what are you doing here? Where's your mom? I asked, placing 24 roses on the table along with a bottle of wine and a box of chocolates. I have a special surprise for your mom tonight, and I can't wait to see her. Reaching into my jacket pocket, I pulled out travel plans and tickets for a 7-day cruise. I'm taking your mom on a week-long cruise on the yacht Love, and I can't wait to see her face when she finds out. Please don't say anything when she gets home, I want to surprise her. Dad, she said, calling me Daddy in that sweet voice I remembered from when she was little. But then I noticed something was off. Tears welled in her eyes, and she was out of breath. Dad, we need to talk, she said, a tear rolling down her cheek. I saw the worry etched on my face. What's wrong? Is something happening with Mom? No, Mom is fine. Please, just sit down and let me explain everything. I leaned in, searching her tear-filled eyes as she took a moment to gather herself. Dad, you know how much Mom loves you, right? And she's told me how well things have been going between you two lately. Yes, and I love her too, which is why I want to show her how I feel. But as I looked at her tears, I started to realize that what she was about to say was not going to be easy to hear. I'm really sorry, Daddy, but Mom has a date. I fell silent, struggling to process her words while my mind raced. I saw her tears flow as my brain connected the dots and sparked a surge of anger. What are you talking about? Where is your mother? I demanded, my voice loud enough to make her flinch in fear. Mommy loves you so much, Daddy, but you might take this the wrong way. She's gone on a date with another man and won't be back until tomorrow. She couldn't tell you herself, so I volunteered because she didn't want to hurt you. It's just one night, and she'll be back tomorrow. This can't be true. You can't be serious. Your mother would never betray me like that. She's been so loving, and we were so close. I just can't believe this. Dad, she loves you. She just needed to do something for herself after 28 years of marriage. She felt uneasy and craved something more in life, even just once. Nothing will change between you two, she will love you even more for letting her have this experience. I looked closely at my daughter. Darling, why are you getting involved in this? Your mother should have handled this on her own. I should be talking to her, not you. How did she get you into all of this? Dad, you know that Mom and I have always been really close, and we tell each other everything. She confided in me that things had slowed down in the bedroom and that she no longer felt wanted. She needed stimulation. My friend's father lost his wife several years ago, and he fell into a deep depression, craving communication. I sort of facilitated their introduction. Suddenly, I stood up, knocking over the chair behind me. What the heck? Are you kidding me? You set up your mother on a date with another man? Is that what you're saying? Lowering her head and staring at the floor, she went silent. I started pacing back and forth in the kitchen, trying to wrap my mind around this disaster. Darling, answer me. I shouted, standing over her. Did you really set this all up? My wife, your mother, is on a date with your friend's father, and you arranged it? I'm really sorry, Daddy, but yes, she replied, her voice trembling. I know it sounds bad when you put it that way, but I did it out of love for my friend's mom and dad. Holy hell, what have you done? Love for your friend's mom and dad? What about your love for me? Am I just some piece of trash you can throw away and then expect me to accept whatever comes into your mind? Where is she now? What do you mean when you say she won't be home until tomorrow? She went to a restaurant with him, but I don't know which one. Then they'll spend the night together. But don't worry, she'll be back tomorrow. And, Daddy, she only loves you. For the past 2 weeks, she's been telling me how much she loves you and doesn't want you to get hurt. It's just one date, and she knew you would understand and let her have this one-time experience. So all those advances I thought were out of love. I feel like a fool. Are you saying this was just her way of alleviating her guilt? This will not lead to anything good, I assure you. Still in tears, she begged, Dad, it's not like that at all. She never pretended or meant to hurt you. On the contrary, she's done everything possible to let you know she loves you. Can't you just give her this one night? You know she loves you and can't live without you. She told me she was looking forward to your retirement and spending time with your grandchildren. Sam and I are planning to have kids, and we need both of you. Isn't that just great? That ship sailed the moment she agreed to go on a date with another man who isn't me. Who is this guy? My friend Emily's dad. He's a really nice guy, and I think you'll like him, Daddy. You have a lot in common. Oh, sure. We could be such good buddies. You think I can befriend a man who knowingly dates a married woman, my wife? Maybe we can become drinking buddies, and I can let him take your mom out on weekends. Is that what you two have planned for me? My daughter sank into her chair, realizing there was a serious flaw in her plan. She had never seen me so angry, and my words made her shiver. As I paced around the room, I finally regained control of my emotions and turned to her, my voice laced with venom, a tone she didn't want to hear. My hurt and pain were apparent, making her feel small and guilty for her role in all this. Listen to me carefully, darling. I want you to leave now. I need to be alone to process what you both did to me tonight. I don't want to see or hear from you. Don't call me, don't write to me, never. Your betrayal is unforgivable, and right now, I have no daughter. You are dead to me. Do you understand what this means? I am no longer your father, and I don't have a daughter. Now get out of my house and never speak to me again. She sobbed openly, her head in her hands. Dad, please don't say that. I love you, and I don't want to stay here tonight. Mom and I planned for me to stay with you. We don't want you to be alone. Darling, the level of disrespect you've shown me makes me wonder if you ever respected me or loved me as your father. You are your mother's daughter. All these years, I worked like a dog to provide you and your mother with a better life, and this is the gratitude I get? Turns out, I'm only here as a meal ticket, and I've clearly never earned respect from either of you. Between tears and sobs, she continued, Dad, I love you. Please don't say that. Just leave your mother, and we'll talk about this tomorrow. Go be with your cheating mother. I snapped, my voice harsh and final. Immediately after she left, I called Emma on her cell phone, but the call went straight to voicemail. I left several messages pleading for her to call me and come home. After a few drinks and still no call back, I sent her multiple texts with the same message. No answer. It was clear she wasn't going to respond. I was tired of feeling sorry for myself, so I just stared at the TV, which was broadcasting more bad news. My world had turned into a nightmare in an instant. I reflected on our 28 years of marriage, the good times, the birth of our daughter, all the parties, and the closeness we shared. Now, everything felt irreparably lost. Just before she cheated, Emma and I were still intimate 2 to 3 times a week. Sure, it had become a routine and wasn't as thrilling as it was 28 years ago, but there were never any complaints. After sex, we always hugged and fell asleep in each other's arms. There wasn't a day that went by without us expressing our love for one another. I loved hearing those words exchanged between us, and we rarely argued. As I looked out the window, my gaze fell upon the art studio I had built for Emma to support her passion. For the past 20 years, she had poured her heart into creating beautiful paintings and sculptures in that space, earning several awards for her work, which I proudly displayed in the room designed to showcase her achievements. The studio had become a shrine to her talent and a refuge where she could escape. I always felt that, aside from our daughter, that studio was the most important thing in her life. I came in a distant third on her list of priorities, but I loved her, and as long as she was happy, I felt content. The conversation with Darlene hit me hard. The revelation that Emma needed to sleep with another man took me by surprise, without any warning. I realized, with all the long hours I had worked to provide for my family, I had been too preoccupied to notice that she was dissatisfied with our marriage. The fact that she would do this to us without talking to me and instead confide in Darlene felt humiliating and only fueled my anger. I began to think about my life, my home, and my future. I had inherited the house and property from my grandfather, and it was in my name before we married. There was no mortgage on the place, which, in my drunken state, suddenly gave me a surge of strength and renewed energy. Jumping up from the couch, I channeled my sadness into action. I made more than a dozen trips to our bedroom, collecting all of Emma's belongings and moving them into the studio. All her expensive shoes, dresses, clothes, underwear, jewelry, everything that belonged to her was now piled on the floor in the center of her sanctuary, the art studio. For the next hour, I scoured the house for all the photo albums, including our wedding photos, and added them to the growing mound. Then I remembered that she had vacuum-sealed items in the attic. I found her wedding dress, baby clothes, and many other sentimental pieces, dragging them into the pile, which now stood over 3 feet high. It's astonishing how much one person can accumulate over the years. I took down all her pictures from the walls, adding them to the heap. The sculptures, all her sketches, and everything she loved became part of this ever-growing collection of her past. By the time it was 5 o'clock in the morning, I was still on edge. I told myself I wouldn't take any further action until 6 a.m., giving her a chance to come home or respond to my calls and texts. If I didn't hear from her or if she wasn't home by then, I would finish what I started. I walked through the house again, ensuring everything she owned and cared for was in the studio. At 5:30, I grabbed a 5-gallon can of gasoline from the garage and headed to the studio, preparing for what was to come. During this time, I went online to cancel our joint credit cards and transferred money to our separate accounts. I took cash out of the safe, packed a few suitcases, and loaded them into my truck, knowing I would need to spend some time away from home until the lawyer sorted everything out. After waiting another 5 minutes for her to return and abandoning my last glimmer of hope, I poured gasoline over the pile and along the walls of the studio. With a deep sigh, and after a few moments of hesitation, I made my decision. I tossed a lit match onto the floor, and it instantly ignited the pile of her treasures. The flames spread quickly, and before I had time to leave, they were already visible from the street. The fire engulfed her world and everything she cherished. As I drove along the highway, a sudden realization struck me, amplified by my terrible state. A wave of sadness washed over me, and tears streamed down my face. At that moment, it became clear that my once wonderful marriage had suffered the same fate as the studio, it had burned down. What I didn't expect was for the fire to spread from the studio to the back porch, igniting both structures. Fortunately, the firefighters who extinguished the fire in the studio managed to save the house from significant damage, though it sustained considerable smoke damage and was uninhabitable until repairs were made. While all this chaos unfolded, I checked into a highway motel about 70 miles away from the smoldering ruins of my marriage, paying in cash. I didn't want to be found until I could think straight, and using credit cards would make it easier for the police to track me down. I was running on adrenaline until I opened the door to my room, turned off my phone, and collapsed onto the bed, falling into a deep sleep and waking up only at noon. When I finally turned my phone back on, it lit up with dozens of missed calls and texts from Emma, Darlene, and the sheriff. Meanwhile, Emma had met Robert at the restaurant and was both nervous and excited to see the handsome young man waiting for her at the reception desk. He smiled when he caught sight of her, admiring her little black dress, sheer black tights, and matching high heels. His eyes were drawn to her exposed cleavage, highlighted by her black bra. She had spent several hours at the salon perfecting her hair and makeup for this one-time experience, and Robert looked pleased with the sight before him. The way he adjusted himself made it clear he was attracted to her, and Emma's confidence soared as she took in his reaction. Emma could see that Robert appreciated her appearance, and she greeted him with a soft kiss as they began their night together. They started at the bar, settling onto the stools as he ordered their drinks. When she stood up, she noticed his eyes scanning her nylon-covered legs down to her panties. They both smiled at each other, and Emma decided to turn off her phone, wanting nothing to disrupt the night ahead. She knew this experience was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and she intended to savor every moment. There was undeniable chemistry between them, and they connected like old friends. Emma found herself playfully touching his arm and flirting, something she rarely did, even with Greg. But tonight, she wanted to fully embrace this night with Robert. She slipped off her heels and playfully nestled her foot between his legs. When he looked down at her red toenails peeking through the sheer nylon, he smiled and said it was time to go. Hand in hand, he led her to his hotel room, which he had already booked. As the elevator doors opened on the 10th floor, reality hit her, and she briefly thought of Greg. But Robert sensed her hesitation, pulling her close and giving her a romantic kiss that was unlike anything she had ever experienced before. That was all it took for her to forget about her husband and their marriage for the night. Once inside the room, Robert wasted no time unzipping her dress. As it fell to the floor, he undressed as well, spinning her around and complimenting her on how sexy she looked. He removed her bra and laid her down on the bed. Emma lost track of time as they made love. It was sensual and filled with affection, making her melt in anticipation of what was to come. She knelt down, worshipping his manhood for the next 10 minutes until he couldn't take it anymore. He forcibly removed her panties, telling her to put her heels back on because he found them incredibly sexy. As they made love, Robert kissed her several times, making her feel as if he were an Olympic champion in kissing. A part of her thought, "I've got to get Greg to do this, it's so sexy." But she quickly pushed those thoughts aside, choosing instead to fully enjoy the moment. Looking deeply into her eyes, Robert unexpectedly confessed, "I love you, Emma." His words touched her heart in a way she couldn't describe, overwhelming her with joy and bringing tears to her eyes. They made love 4 more times that night and once more in the morning, each encounter as intense as the last. It was, without a doubt, the best sexual experience of her life, and she felt proud of herself for allowing it to happen. Yet, as she lay there, she began to think about Greg but tried to focus on the man holding her tightly. With the sun peeking through the curtains, he kissed her tenderly and stroked her hair. "Emma," he said, "as I mentioned last night, I'm serious about you. You're an incredible woman, so sexy and sensual. I think I love you and want to spend more time together. Can we meet again?" Now feeling anxious, she tried to soften the blow. "Robert, that was the best sex of my life, and you're such a wonderful, sweet man. But I'm happily married, and I can't do this again. It was meant to be a one-time experience. I loved it, and you were amazing. You are a wonderful lover, and I enjoyed every second. Emma, it seems like you don't mind what happened. If you let this continue, I can make you very happy. Just think about it before you say no, please." "Okay, yes, I'll think about it," she said, surrendering to another deep kiss as she melted into his arms. If she weren't married to Greg, she would have chosen to be with Robert in an instant. But Greg was her husband, and she hoped he could forgive her for what had just occurred. After breakfast, they left the hotel, and as Robert drove her home, she turned on her phone for the first time since their date. She was shocked to see all the missed calls and texts. Upon seeing Greg's messages, guilt pierced her heart. This dear man was suffering, and she wasn't there for him. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized the pain she had caused him. Before she could process her emotions further, her phone rang. It was Sophie. "Mom, where are you?" "Hey, baby, I'm almost home," Emma replied. "Mom, there was a fire at the house. We tried calling you all night, but it seems you turned off your phone." "Fire? Where's your dad?" Emma asked, her heart racing. "That's the point, Mom. He's missing. Nobody knows where he is, and he won't answer his calls either. I have a bad feeling about this." "Emma, I'm almost there. I'll call you back." As Robert turned into their neighborhood, Emma saw fire trucks and police cars in front of their house. She didn't notice any damage from the front and hurriedly asked the firefighters what had happened. "Are you the owner of the house?" one of them inquired. "Yes, I'm Emma Keller." "Well, Mrs. Keller, we managed to save the house. Only the back porch was damaged, but I'm afraid you won't be able to stay here until the experts clean up the smoke from inside. Most of the damage was done to the small cottage behind your home. It's completely lost." Emma felt her legs give out, and Robert caught her, helping her sit on the curb. "My studio, is it damaged?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Keller. All that's left is smoldering ashes. We'll investigate the cause of the fire, but in the meantime, the police detective has a few questions for you. Emma quickly stood up and ran to the back of the house. Before Sergeant Peterson could ask her anything, he caught up with her as she stared at the remains of her most prized possession. "Mrs. Keller, do you know what happened here?" he asked. "No," Emma replied, feeling the weight of her actions crashing down around her. "I wasn't here last night, and I have no idea what happened," Emma replied, her voice shaky. "Are you her husband?" Sergeant Peterson asked, turning to Robert. "No, just a friend," Robert said, trying to stay calm. Susan felt her face heat with embarrassment as the sergeant gave her a knowing look. "Where's your husband?" he asked. "I don't know, Sergeant Peterson," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where were you last night?" he pressed. "I was with Robert at the Hilton Hotel in the city center." The glances exchanged between the sergeant and his assistant made her acutely aware of the gravity of her situation. She had just confessed to spending the night away from her husband, who was now missing. The detective had more questions. "Sergeant Peterson, are you and your husband separated? Do you know where he was last night?" "No, we are happily married," she insisted, but the words sounded hollow, especially after admitting to her night with another man. "He doesn't answer calls." "Well, I want to talk to him. Please give him my number." He handed her his business card. Shaking with a mix of anger and fear, Emma felt rage at the loss of her sanctuary in the years of work she had dedicated to her art. Everything she had built was now gone forever. She was afraid that Greg could be so angry as to do something drastic, and she feared what that could mean for their marriage. She needed to talk to him as soon as possible. Emma called Sophie. "Sophie, do you know where your father is?" "No, I haven't talked to him since yesterday evening." "Why didn't you stay with him like we planned?" "Sweetheart, he threw me out and said I was no longer his daughter." Hearing those words sent a chill through Emma's body. Greg would never say something like that, and if he did, it would be far worse than she could have imagined. As she entered their home, the damage was evident, smoke stained the walls, and a terrible smell filled the air. It was clear that living there under such conditions was impossible. She walked through the house, deciding to gather some clothes and personal items for a few days. But when she entered the bedroom, panic struck her. Everything was gone, her clothes, shoes, and personal belongings were missing. Her heart sank as she looked at her nightstand for her wedding rings, only to find them absent. Why did I leave my rings? What was I thinking? She wondered if Greg had seen them on the dresser and thought she had abandoned him and their marriage. How stupid and selfish could she be? In a complete panic, she rushed around the house, checking every room, only to realize that all her belongings were missing. A terrible thought struck her: did he really burn everything? Is there truly nothing left? She dashed out of the house and returned to the studio to examine the wreckage more closely. In the center of the room, she spotted picture frames and pieces of clothing that hadn't been completely destroyed. It was painfully clear that Greg had not accepted her night away as she had hoped. Instead, he had annihilated everything important to her in one fell swoop. Emma called Sophie, tears streaming down her face. "Sophie, I need somewhere to stay." Robert quickly offered his place, but he was the last person she wanted to see. "I need to be alone," she said, her voice strained. He was hurt by her tone and walked away, leaving her standing there in anguish. At that moment, she was angry with herself and with Robert. She knew she was wrong but found it easier to blame him for her betrayal when the responsibility clearly lay with her. "Sophie, don't say that. Dad loves you." "Sweetheart, he burned everything, my clothes, my paintings, my studio. He didn't leave me anything, not even a place to live. He won't pick up the phone or answer my calls. What I did is unforgivable. I shouldn't have gone on that date, I should have just told him how I felt. We could have worked things out, but my selfishness pushed him away. If I were in his shoes, I could never take him back. What should I do now?" I have neither a house nor clothes. Sophie, don't blame yourself. This is partly my fault too. You can stay with us until your house is restored. This afternoon we can buy you new clothes and settle you in. Rachel, all my paintings and sculptures are gone. 28 years of marriage and 20 years of my life's work are destroyed. I'm all alone, I have nothing to live for. Mom, don't say that. I'll help you. Emma sobbed openly while the neighbors watched from the road. Sweetheart, Dad is calling me. I'll call you back. As she fumbled with the buttons, desperately trying to answer the call, Emma nearly passed out. At the last second, she managed to connect. Emma, is that you? Greg's voice sounded strained. Greg, hi. Where are you? Please come home, we need to talk. No, Emma, I know everything from Sophie. Yes, your daughter, not mine. You're both dead to me. This may be the last time we talk. Greg, no. Please don't say that. I love you, you should know this. The studio is gone, did you do this? Emma, you did it, not me. Maybe not physically, but it burned down because of your treachery and betrayal. When I saw that your wedding rings were thrown away and that you gave yourself to another man, you died in my heart. Your actions are inexcusable, and Sophie's involvement is both humiliating and incomprehensible. We're done. You'll meet with the lawyers on Monday to start the process. Greg, please. Can't we talk this out? You can't just throw away our 28 wonderful years like that. Susan, I'm the one who's not throwing away our years together. You planned to betray me. You gave me 2 weeks of amazing love to ease your conscience, and then you cheated on me with the help of your daughter. No one on this earth could accept or forgive that level of treachery. It's pure evil, and I hope you regret your actions for the rest of your pathetic life. This is the last time we're speaking. You can contact me through my attorney's information, which will be included in the divorce decree. Goodbye, Susan. Greg. No, wait. Greg. But he was gone, just like the world she loved and cherished. Just then, Rachel arrived, and they held each other, crying over their immense loss. Eventually, they realized they couldn't stay in the ruins of their home while the fire and police investigated. They needed to figure things out, so they headed to Rachel's house. Once they arrived, Rachel explained everything to Sam, who was shocked by her account of events. Sam, I need to tell you the whole story. But when you hear that I arranged a date for my mom with another man while knowing my father would be alone, you might not understand. It was just a one-time date after 28 years of marriage. For God's sake, it wasn't meant to end like this. Rachel, you arranged a date for your mother, knowing your father would be alone. What kind of man would allow his wife to go out with another man? Is this how you plan to behave when we get older? Will you let someone cuckold you like your mother did to your father? He was such a wonderful guy, and you and your mom were his whole world. What have you done? I'll tell you what you did. You destroyed a good man and forced him to do unthinkable things. I can't express how disappointed I am in you. I'll contact him and apologize for your stupidity when this is all over. You and I will have a serious conversation about our future together because having children with you is officially on hold until I better understand your values. I'll be straight with you, I don't share them, and I won't tolerate such betrayal. Rachel was taken aback by his anger, surprised he didn't understand her mother's situation. It was just a one-time date after 28 years of marriage. So what? But she realized the bigger issue was the end of her parents' marriage, the loss of her father and her mother's happiness. Soon, they would all have to face the consequences of her actions. 5 long days later, I returned to my house to assess the damage. I wasn't going to file an insurance claim because I didn't want to incur any additional costs on top of what I already had. At the meeting with the lawyer, I explained that the house belonged to me and wasn't part of the settlement. Susan could have half our savings, but there would be no alimony. If she resisted, I would file a suit for adultery and tell everyone how she cheated on me with her daughter's friend's father. I had already met with a lawyer and started filing divorce papers, and I also asked for the name of a criminal arson attorney. However, after meeting with him, I realized that since I owned the property, there likely wouldn't be a criminal prosecution unless I filed an insurance claim, which I had no intention of doing. In the worst-case scenario, firefighters might issue a fine, but criminal charges wouldn't go through the courts unless a false report was made. One of our neighbors, who Rachel went to school with, called her when she saw me come home and enter the house. Rachel quickly rushed to me while I was inspecting the damage and assessing what work was needed to make the house livable. "Dad! Dad, where are you?" Rachel screamed as she entered the house. I didn't answer, continuing to assess the damage while looking out the window at the pile of ashes that had once been Susan's sanctuary. "Daddy, I am so sorry. Please forgive us, we love you." "Rachel, I will never forgive either of you. I already told you to never talk to me again. Now please, let me go and leave me alone." "No. You are my father, and you must forgive me. I am your only daughter, and you love me. Rachel, pay attention. I no longer have a daughter, only a treacherous woman who broke my heart. You are not my daughter. Please leave me alone. Dad. Mom needs you. She lives with us and misses you very much. She cries all the time and wants to apologize for her mistake. Could you come to my house and see her?" "Never. The moment she went on that date and spent the night with another man, she ended our marriage. Hell, she even left her wedding rings on the table, which signifies the end of our marriage. It's over, and I won't talk to her anymore. You can both reach me through my lawyer. I will buy a new phone and get a new number, but for now, you should go and be with your cheating mother. Are you really going to throw away 28 years of a happy marriage?" "No, not me. Your mother threw away those 28 years the moment she took off her rings and went to her lover. It was you and your mother who ruined my happiness, and for this, I will never forgive or forget either of you. Now get out of my house." For the second time, Rachel ran out of her childhood home, tears streaming down her face. The pain of her father's words, that she was no longer his daughter, was devastating and heartbreaking. Not even years of therapy could erase the sting of his declaration. The next day, Susan was served with divorce papers and collapsed, realizing that her marriage was over because of her selfish act of infidelity. She attempted to fight him, went to counseling, and tried to communicate with Greg, but to no avail, he never spoke to her or Rachel again. Eventually, Sam got through to Greg and expressed his anger and disappointment regarding Rachel's actions. He stated that he had changed his mind about having children because of how he felt about Rachel's loyalty and her involvement in the betrayal. Sam would never want to live with a woman who would act like this, he declared, and he was currently undergoing couples counseling to see if he and Rachel could salvage their relationship. Susan wanted to move back into the house after Greg rebuilt it, but the divorce agreement stipulated that the house belonged solely to him and was not part of the settlement. She would need to find her own place. The judge ultimately awarded her half of their savings and $3,000 a month in alimony for 10 years, but Greg had no intention of paying it. Susan would have to find a job to support herself, something she hadn't done in the previous 28 years of their marriage. Eventually, she moved out of Rachel's apartment and into a small one-room apartment near the city center, where she found work at a small art gallery as a sales agent to make ends meet. Susan's creative freedom was suddenly stifled. She could no longer spend her days in the beautiful studio that Greg had built for her. She would miss sitting in front of her art projects and enjoying the stunning view of the lake from the large panoramic windows her husband had given her. Soon, she would be too busy with work, using all her free time just to make her life somewhat bearable. All her leisure time was gone, along with her luxury and happy marriage, all for one exciting night with another man. No amount of tears could erase the hurt and suffering caused by that one reckless decision. Her loving husband, Greg, would never speak to her again, and hearing how he dismissed their daughter left her heartbroken. Rachel fell into a deep depression from the fallout of her parents' marriage. To cope with the pain and save her own relationship, which was now crumbling, she turned to a psychotherapist. A few months later, after the house was restored, Greg continued to pay the court-ordered alimony. Without warning, he sold the house. One day, after the sale, Susan approached him to try to reconcile and asked for forgiveness. When she rang the bell, a young couple opened the door. "Hello. How can we help you?" "Yes, I'm looking for Greg Keller." "Is he here?" "Oh, that nice man who sold us this house." "No, he said he was leaving the country to start a new life. He was so sweet and helpful." "Are you by any chance Susan?" "Yes, that's me. He left an envelope and asked us to give it to you if you ever stopped by." "Thank you. I'll read it later." "Good luck, and enjoy your wonderful new home." Susan sat in her car and cried, knowing she would never see Greg again and mourning the love she had so carelessly tossed aside. Upon returning to her lonely apartment, she sat up in bed, her hand trembling as she opened the letter. 28 wonderful years. I will always remember the beautiful life we lived together. You were my first and only love, and I'm very sorry that I didn't meet the expectations of your husband. If I had known you needed more, I would have moved heaven and earth for you. But since you chose to seek your own path, this is how our marriage ends, alone. After 2 wonderful weeks leading up to your betrayal, I truly believed you had fallen in love with me again. Those weeks were the happiest in all the years I spent with you. When Rachel explained how you used those weeks to distract me from your betrayal, it crushed my soul. I'm sure Rachel has already told you, but that night I was so excited to come home and give you a special evening with 24 roses, your favorite chocolates, and wine. I planned to surprise you with a new cruise on the yacht Love. Learning that your love and adoration were fake, and that your true goal was to sleep with another man left me feeling utterly humiliated. Congratulations, you ruined me and our marriage. Because of this, I can no longer stay in this city. I will buy a new phone and get a new number, but for now, you should go be with your cheating mother. Are you really going to throw away 28 years of a happy marriage? No, not me. Your mother threw away those 28 years the moment she took off her rings and went to her lover. It was you and your mother who ruined my life, and for this, I will never forgive or forget either of you. Now get out of my house." Rachel ran out of her childhood home for the second time, tears streaming down her cheeks. The pain of her father's words, that she was no longer his daughter, was devastating and heart-wrenching. Even years of therapy couldn't erase the sting of his declaration. The next day, Susan was served with divorce papers and collapsed, realizing her marriage was over because of her selfish act of infidelity. She tried to fight for their relationship, went to counseling, and attempted to communicate with Greg, but nothing worked. He refused to speak to her or Rachel again. Eventually, Sam managed to reach Greg and expressed his anger and disappointment over what Rachel had done. He made it clear that he had changed his mind about having children because of how he felt about Rachel's loyalty and her involvement in the betrayal. Sam would never want to live with a woman who acted like this, he said, and he began couples counseling to determine if he and Rachel could salvage their relationship. Susan wanted to return to the house after Greg rebuilt it, but the divorce agreement stipulated that the house belonged solely to him and wasn't part of the settlement. She would have to find her own place. The judge ultimately awarded her half of their savings and $3,000 a month in alimony for 10 years, but Greg had no intention of paying. Susan would need to find a job to support herself, something she hadn't done during their 28 years of marriage. Eventually, she moved out of Rachel's apartment and into a small one-room apartment near the city center, where she found work at a small art gallery as a sales agent to make ends meet. Her creative freedom was suddenly stifled. She could no longer spend her days in the beautiful studio that Greg had built for her. She missed sitting in front of her art projects and enjoying the breathtaking view of the lake from the large panoramic windows her husband had provided. Soon, she would be too busy with work, using all her free time to make her life somewhat livable. All her leisure time was gone, along with her luxury and happy marriage, all for one exciting night with another man. No amount of tears could erase the hurt and suffering caused by that one reckless decision. Greg would never speak to her again, and hearing how he dismissed their daughter left Susan heartbroken. Rachel fell into a deep depression from the fallout of her parents' marriage. To cope with the pain and save her own relationship, which was now crumbling, she turned to a psychotherapist. Months later, after the house was restored, Greg continued to pay the court-ordered alimony. Without warning, he sold the house. One day, after the sale, Susan approached him to try to reconcile and ask for forgiveness. When she rang the bell, a young couple opened the door. "Hello. How can we help you?" "Yes, I'm looking for Greg Keller." "Is he here?" "Oh, that nice man who sold us this house." "No, he said he was leaving the country to start a new life. He was so sweet and helpful." "Are you by any chance Susan?" "Yes, that's me. He left an envelope and asked us to give it to you if you ever stopped by." "Thank you. I'll read it later." "Good luck, and enjoy your wonderful new home." Susan sat in her car and cried, knowing she would never see Greg again and mourning the love she had carelessly thrown away. Upon returning to her lonely apartment, she sat up in bed, her hand trembling as she opened the letter. 28 wonderful years. I will always remember the beautiful life we lived together. You were my first and only love, and I'm very sorry that I couldn't meet the expectations of your husband. If I had known you needed more, I would have moved heaven and earth for you. But since you chose to seek your own path, this is how our marriage ends, alone. After 2 wonderful weeks leading up to your betrayal, I truly believed you had fallen in love with me again. Those weeks were the happiest in all the years I spent with you. When Rachel explained how you used those weeks to distract me from your betrayal, it crushed my soul. I'm sure Rachel has already told you, but that night I was so excited to come home and give you a special evening with 24 roses, your favorite chocolates, and wine. I planned to surprise you with a new cruise on the yacht Love. Learning that your love and adoration were fake, and that your true goal was to sleep with another man left me feeling utterly humiliated. Congratulations, you ruined me and our marriage. Because of this, I can no longer stay in this city. Susan actually thought she had no more tears left, but after reading his letter, she sobbed uncontrollably all night, curled up in a ball. The excitement and memories of the amazing time with Robert faded, now replaced by overwhelming regret and sadness. Alone at 45, she knew her future without Greg looked bleak. She had given up her luxurious life for one night of selfish excitement. Meanwhile, Greg confronted Robert late at night as he was leaving for his new home in Ecuador. When the door opened, Greg pushed his way inside and introduced himself as the husband of the woman Robert had stolen from him. Robert tried to explain that he thought Susan didn't mind being with him and would never have pursued her if he had known. But it was too late. Greg wouldn't accept any of his excuses. All the anger, rage, and pain he had lived with for the past months were now directed at the predator standing in front of him. The conversation was brief, and in less than a minute, Greg's fury changed Robert's life forever. Before walking to his waiting Uber to leave for the airport, Greg looked at the cowering man and said, "Here's some advice: messing with a married woman is harmful to your health." By the time Robert arrived at the emergency room and told the police what had happened, Greg was already en route to his new apartment on the beach in Manave. His new life had begun without his previous baggage and family. It took police detectives 2 weeks to discover that Greg was no longer in the country, and they couldn't do anything until he returned home. Even if they managed to find him, there was no extradition in Ecuador for assault charges. Robert spent 2 agonizing weeks in the hospital and many months in physical therapy, learning to walk with his new knees. Unfortunately for him, the 25 stitches on his face would remain a lasting reminder of that night with the married woman. He had no idea what his life would be like moving forward, but he understood that the life he once had was over, thanks to the 2 women who had convinced him to pursue another man's wife. He never spoke to or saw Susan or Rachel again. Rachel's husband, Sam, nearly divorced her over the incident, but a psychologist helped Rachel understand the gravity of her actions. She promised to remain faithful to Sam and their future family. Sam waited 2 years before agreeing to have children, needing to convince himself that his wife would never betray him the way she had betrayed her father. True to his word, Greg never spoke to Rachel again. By her actions, she had forever rejected her father and his love. Upon learning of Robert's beating, Susan and Rachel were devastated and felt responsible for the attack, adding to the guilt and pain they had caused Greg and the destruction of their family. It was a harsh reminder that their actions had far-reaching consequences they hadn't foreseen. Both women realized that their delusions, that if only Greg had allowed Susan that one time, their happy life would have continued, were false. Their stupidity ensured that a happy life was the furthest thing from the truth. The loss of their father and husband became a deep, abiding pain they would carry for the rest of their days. Due to depression and age, Susan never found another man and lived a lonely, sad life. All her plans for a happy old age with Greg and their grandchildren faded into distant memories. Once Greg left the country, he stopped sending money, and her savings dwindled quickly. She had to continue working to survive, and crying in her sleep became a regular activity for her. I now have over $750,000 from the sale of my house and my savings over the past 28 years, minus the cost of my new apartment. With this amount of money here in Ecuador, my next 30 years will be lived in comfort and peace. There are many young, attractive women here who appreciate a generous American man, and I enjoy being with all of them. 6 months after that terrible night, Greg found himself on the beach in Port Liggett, across from his new apartment, drinking a cold beer and realizing that divorce is normal, breaking up is okay, and it's perfectly fine to be alone. What's not normal is staying in a place where you're not valued or respected. This will never happen again. Thanks for watching this intense and heartbreaking story. Have you ever experienced a betrayal like Greg's? How did you handle it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more shocking stories of love, betrayal, and redemption. Stay tuned for the next one, it's even more unbelievable. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe to the channel to watch my next videos and share with me your opinion, what you would do in my place.